Welcome, this is Patty Bennett. Thanks for joining me on a Patty Stamps video tutorial. I am going to share with you the technique I used to create these really pretty trees with this soft watercolor effect. We are using the Stampin' Up! Rooted in Nature stamp set, specifically this tree stamp right here, and markers, Stampin' Right markers, and a water spritzer. So let me show you how easy it is to create this beautiful effect. I actually did two different things here. So on this card that we're going to start with, I stamped on watercolor paper. On these two cards, you can see I just stamped directly onto the wood textures paper, so it already looks like wood. So let's start with this one. I used the stitched shape oval framelit to die cut a piece of watercolor paper. I've got my tree stamp here. I'm just going to flip it over and color on the back. I have my Mossy Meadow and Early Espresso Stampin' Right markers, and I'm going to start by just coloring Mossy Meadow onto the greenery of the tree. You could also just ink this part in your green ink pad. That would be totally fine. And then with the Early Espresso, I'm going to color in the trunk, and then there's little bits of the trunk kind of up into here, so kind of just have to guess, but you do your best. And then you'll use a Stampin' Spritzer with water, and I'm going to just do this off camera because if I spray it right here, I'm going to get my whole area wet. But I am spraying 2 to 3 light spritzes about 12 inches apart. So I don't know if you can see that that's wet. Now what I'm going to do is just stamp straight down, and I'm going to hold it there on my watercolor paper for a few seconds to let that water soak in. And depending on how much water you use and how long you kind of hold it there to soak in will depend on the effect. That is really cool. Now what you can tell is that every one does come out different. And on this one, we have kind of almost a stippled leaf effect, which I really like. I used less water on this one. On this one, I used more water, and you can see that it really kind of bled. Now, if you want to turn this into this, all you have to do is spritz this with some more water with your spritzer, and it will start to bleed. But I actually really like that effect. It's just somewhat different. So I'm going to leave that one as is. Now let's look at it when we stamp onto the wood grain paper. I think you can see the difference. This one is a little more defined and had less water. This one had a little more water and it's a little more blurred. So it's just the patterned wood grain paper. And since it absorbs water a little differently than the watercolor paper, you are going to get that different look. Now let me show you a tip for cutting the 6x6 paper to get 3 cards like this. Sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to make the most of a 6x6 piece of designer paper to maximize your cards. But I found a great way to cut this into 3 pieces, and it makes 3 different cards. So the first thing that I did was I cut this 6x6 piece at 4 inches. And then this piece I cut down to, you can either do 5.5 or 4 1/4, and it just, I'll show you, it just sort of depends what you'd like to do on that card. And then on this one, I'm just cutting this 6-inch piece in half at 3 inches so that I have 2 pieces that are 3 by 4, and then I have this one that is about 5 1/4 by 2. So what you can see that I did is this tall skinny piece goes here, and I stamped the tree down at the bottom of it. And then this piece becomes the 3 by 4 piece on this card. And the base of all of these cards is just a Mossy Meadow 11 by 4 1/4 scored in half, folded in half, so it's a top fold card. And then I used the Woodland Embossing Folder, which I just love this folder. Can you see those really neat tree trunks there? So I embossed it on Very Vanilla. So that goes here. So then your 3x4 piece goes here. So then you'll make 2 cards out of that one 6x6. And the tall skinny piece goes here. So again, you could have left that at 5.5, the whole height of the card. You can do it down to 4.25 like this, but whatever, you just end up with only that much left over. So I think this is a really great way to use a 6x6. You can find all of these supplies by going to pattystamps.com and click on any of the shop online buttons, or you can go to mystamporder.com and find these supplies. So again, it's the Stampin' Up! Rooted in Nature stamp set and the Woodland Embossing Folder, as well as the markers and the water spritzer. I hope you enjoyed that. I'd love to answer any questions if you have any. And thanks for joining me for another Patty Stamps video tutorial.